I can't say what the first sound of the end was. Maybe it was the dry snap of countless lights dying at once, as if the whole planet blinked and forgot to come back. Maybe it was the silence of refrigerators, elevators, highways, silence so complete it felt like a new substance filling the space where life used to be. I only know that before everything stopped, the message came. Not on a phone, because phones were still objects full of promise. Not on television, because television still pretended it could hold the world together. The message appeared everywhere a screen existed: digital billboards, airplane monitors, street clocks, forgotten tablets, subway panels, security systems, bank terminals, highway signs. A single synchronized flash, as if an invisible hand pressed the same button across the entire earth. For a few seconds, humanity lived inside an illusion that there was still enough network left to unite everyone under one sentence. Then it ended. The power fell like a verdict. It wasn't a local blackout, not a solar storm from the news, not sabotage, not war. It was a decision. Energy simply stopped obeying. Transmission lines went mute. Plants went blind. Generators failed as if they'd never learned to be bored. The glow of cities turned into dead stardust. The internet died in the same instant, like an animal that needs oxygen and suddenly had the air removed. Satellites became useless. Undersea cables turned into clogged arteries. Even analog radios spat static and gave up. The entire planet was put on silent mode, and the most terrifying part was that no visible effort was required. No explosion. No blast. No war. Just the sensation that the laws of our comfort had been revoked. Then came the cars. I watched engines stop in the middle of streets as if someone pulled their souls out. I saw buses go dark with people trapped inside. I saw ambulances choke, sirens dying midair. I saw airplanes in the distance lose their perfect line and become dots dropping far too fast. And when the first news tried to exist, there was nothing left to carry it. The batteries didn't survive either. It wasn't draining like a used device. It was emptying like a punctured lung. Phones died with full charge. Flashlights lit and collapsed. Car batteries became dead weight. Fresh cells turned useless. Anything that stored energy began to behave as if energy no longer wanted to stay. At first people screamed for someone to blame, a government, an enemy, a conspiracy. Then they realized you can't blame anyone when you can't even speak to anyone. The financial system was the second heart to stop. No power, no network, no synchronization. Banks became empty buildings filled with meaningless paper. Cards became plastic. Vaults became locked boxes without a purpose. Crypto became a myth with no electricity to breathe. In hours, money returned to what it had always been beneath the illusion, a collective belief. And collective belief requires communication. Without communication, belief dissolves like smoke. When the first morning arrived, the world looked like it had been thrown back into an older century, without the older century's wisdom. We had streets, but no horses. Skyscrapers, but no water rising into them. Hospitals, but no way to keep alive those who depended on machines. Modernity became a stage set. That was the day the sky showed what it wanted. High above the clouds, an image appeared. Not a ship, not an object with a shadow. An image, as if the air itself had become a screen. A gigantic number, white, clean, impossible to mistake for religion or human propaganda. It hovered above cities like an eye. And the number began to drop. Not fast like an explosion. Slow like a countdown that is certain of the ending. Every minute, the entire planet saw the same counter, the same steady fall, as if someone was recording deaths in real time and making sure everyone watched. I didn't know yet what it meant. But watching that number sink, I felt something no power outage had managed to produce, certainty that the end was not an accident. The end was a goal. And we were only the raw material of the math. With the fall of money came something even faster, the collapse of trust. People who had never spoken to each other became suspicious within hours. Supermarkets were the first places to turn into silent battlefields. No registers worked anymore. There was no way to buy, no way to record anything. What remained was the oldest gesture of the species: take before someone else does. Shelves were emptied at a speed no human logistics system had ever achieved. Not through efficiency, but through panic. People pushed carts as if pushing days of life forward. Others abandoned everything once they realized that carrying weight without a destination only prolonged despair. Without communication, rumors became lulls. Someone said power would return in 3 days. Someone else swore the number in the sky was fake, a psychological trick. Some believed it was a divine test. Others claimed it was a weapon gone wrong. None of these explanations survived the sight of the counter falling slowly, and different to human interpretation. Hospitals were the first places where the world truly died. Without power, ICUs became waiting rooms for the end. Ventilators went silent. Heart monitors turned into black mirrors. Doctors, trained to act through technology, were forced to choose who still deserved human effort and who was already too far gone to be saved by bare hands. There was no hysteria. There was exhaustion, deep, respectful exhaustion, as if medicine itself understood that its era was over. Cities began to smell different. Without refrigeration, waste collection, or water treatment, the air gained layers, layers of garbage, fear, and bodies forgotten too soon. The modern world had always smelled like control. Now it smelled like abandonment. And the counter continued. Each drop seemed synchronized with some invisible catastrophe. A plane crashing too far away to be seen. An entire hospital going dark at once. A tunnel where thousands were trapped without air. The number never explained. It only confirmed. By the third day, it became clear this was not just collapse. It was selection. There were no additional messages. No instructions. Only the constant presence of that number in the sky, visible even during the day, shining through clouds, reminding everyone that someone was counting. And that whoever was counting had no urgency and no emotion. That was when I understood the original message didn't need long words. It said everything with math. After the first week, no one asked when the power would return anymore. The question changed to something far colder: who would still be alive when the numbers stopped falling? The financial system didn't simply collapse, it evaporated. Banks became empty buildings guarded by doors that would never open again. Vaults full of useless paper. Credit cards turned into dead plastic. Debt ceased to exist not because they were forgiven, but because there was no longer a world capable of collecting them. The very idea of monetary value disappeared the way artificial things do when the environment that sustains them collapses. Gold could not buy bread. Money could not buy water. Promises could not buy time. What gained value was simple, brutal, and ancient: food, shelter, physical strength, the number of people standing beside you. And above all, local information. Not global, local. Knowing which street still had drinkable water was worth more than any degree. Knowing who was armed decided whether you slept alive. Cities began to fragment. Neighborhoods turned into territories. Buildings became vertical fortresses. Groups formed not by ideology, but by proximity. Families expanded artificially, absorbing strangers out of necessity. Others closed in on themselves, reducing contact to the bare minimum. There was no longer a society. There were human pockets trying to delay the inevitable. And the counter in the sky became a constant psychological presence. No one knew how it worked. We didn't know if it dropped by death, by biological failure, or by criteria we couldn't understand. But it fell. Always. Sometimes slowly, sometimes in sudden plunges that coincided with fires, improvised epidemics, armed conflicts over a bag of rice. When the number fell below 5 billion, something changed in human behavior. Collective hope died. Until then, there was still the illusion that the event was too large to reach me. But mathematics has no compassion. When the counter reached the billions, then the hundreds of millions, the world understood that this was not about global survival. It was about individual survival. That was the point when violence stopped being chaotic and became strategic. Groups began eliminating other groups not out of hatred, but calculation. Less competition meant more resources, more time, more chances of not being the next number subtracted. Some communities created rigid internal rules. Those who became too sick were isolated. Those who threatened the group disappeared at night. There were no long trials. No elevated morality. There was managed fear. I saw good people become efficient. I saw teachers learn to kill without emotion. I saw parents teach children to hide food the way weapons are hidden. I heard prayers whispered not to ask for salvation, but to ask that the number would fall a little more slowly. The sky never answered. In some places, cult-like beliefs formed around the counter. People believed that by accelerating the deaths of others, they could secure their place among the final 1,000. In others, communities tried the opposite, preserving life, even knowing it might only delay the end. None of them knew if they were right. The truth was too simple to be comforting. No one knew how to survive this. When the number fell below 10 million, the planet no longer looked like a human planet. Roads were overtaken by vegetation. Animals reclaimed empty cities. Silence was broken only by isolated conflicts and by the wind moving through structures that would never be repaired again. And above all, by the constant presence of that number in the sky. I stopped counting days. I started counting drops. Each subtraction was a reminder that someone, somewhere, had just ceased to exist, and that the alien system showed no urgency in finishing the process. They were watching us, learning, letting us do almost all the work ourselves. That was when I realized something that froze me inside. The destruction of humanity was not being carried out with weapons. It was being carried out with time. And time was winning. When the number fell below 1 million, something finally broke inside the human mind. It wasn't a collective outburst. It wasn't open panic. It was worse. It was adaptation. People stopped reacting with shock to death. The disappearance of entire groups stopped being news and became a personal statistic. Those who were still breathing learned not to look too far ahead, not to ask too many questions, not to form bonds that could turn into weakness. Violence stopped being explosive and became functional. There were no more large confrontations. No screaming, no chaotic running. There were calculated approaches, silent ambushes, quick attacks carried out with simple tools. Those who lost had no time to ask for help. Those who won did not celebrate. They simply moved on with less competition. Cities turned into empty traps. Buildings that once housed thousands now held echoes. In many of them, signs of recent occupation could be found, remains of small fires, marks of improvised barricades, personal objects abandoned in haste. In others, the silence was absolute, as if human presence had been carefully erased. The counter in the sky kept falling. With each sudden drop, it became clear that something major had happened somewhere on the planet. An entire community erased. A route fought over until no one remained. A simple illness spreading too fast where there was no medicine and no strength left to protect the weak. That was when the hunters appeared. They were not monsters. They were ordinary people who understood before others that survival alone would not be enough. The number around them had to be reduced. Small groups began tracking human movement, observing habits, schedules, vulnerabilities. They struck quickly, took what mattered, and disappeared before anyone could respond. They did not see themselves as villains. They saw themselves as efficient survivors. I saw entire families vanish in a single night. There was no fire, no noise. By morning, only open doors, scattered belongings, and a silence too heavy to be natural remained. Hours later, the number in the sky confirmed what no one needed explained. Morality was one of the first things to die. Ideas like justice, mercy, or guilt began to feel like luxuries from a world that no longer existed. Right and wrong were replaced by useful and useless. Living one more day became justification enough for almost any decision. When the number fell below 100,000, Earth felt far too large for so few people. Forests advanced into cities. Animals moved through places once filled with traffic. The sky was clear of pollution, as if the planet itself was breathing better without us. And maybe it was. That was when the first clear signs of active observation appeared. Some groups reported distant lights at night, not coming from the sky, but following movement on the ground. Others spoke of selective disappearances, healthy, isolated individuals vanishing without a trace, while larger groups were ignored. It wasn't random. The aliens were not just counting. They were choosing. When the number reached 10,000, only scattered human pockets remained across the planet. Too small to be called communities. Too large to go unnoticed. That was when the carnage accelerated. Groups began attacking other groups not for resources, but preemptively. The logic was simple and brutal: if they exist tomorrow, they might be competition later. Fear of the future killed faster than hunger. I survived not through strength or leadership, but through invisibility. I learned not to leave tracks. Not to light fires at night. Not to trust anyone for too long. I learned how to be small in a world that punished anything that drew attention. When the number fell below 2,000, the entire planet seemed to hold its breath. There were no more wars. No more large-scale pursuits. Each life became an event. Each death, a final step. And then the counter slowed. For the first time since the beginning, it seemed cautious. That was when I understood, with a cold sensation running through my entire body, the phase of destruction was ending. And the phase of collection was about to begin. What came next did not begin with an explosion, nor with a voice in the sky. It began with displacement. One night, I fell asleep hidden beneath the remains of a collapsed library, wrapped in dust and old paper, my body tense as if fear itself had learned how to breathe through me. I remembered the smell of the place, the cold of the floor, the absolute silence that only exists when there is no one left nearby. When I woke up, the ground was different. There was no transition. No light, no sound, no sensation of movement. Only the impossible fact that the world around me no longer matched the world I had closed my eyes to face. The sky was the same, but the air carried a different weight. Shadows fell at the wrong angles. And just a few meters away, there were other people. Humans. Some woke up as I did, confused, touching their own bodies, checking if they were still whole. Others were already sitting, motionless, their eyes empty, as if they had accepted the final break of logic. There were no screams. No running. It was as if we all understood, at the same time, that resistance here made no sense. It happened again. And again. Entire groups began waking up in places they had not chosen. People who had hidden for years in isolated regions suddenly appeared close to one another. Distance stopped mattering. Continents ceased to exist. The Earth, to us, had shrunk. The aliens had learned something essential about our species: there is no need to capture us by force when we can be moved like pieces. It was as if the planet had become a board, and we were figures that could be repositioned while asleep. None of us saw the moment of collection. None of us felt hands, machines, or beams. We simply woke up, closer. And the counter in the sky continued. But now it fell more slowly. Not because deaths had stopped, they continued, but because events were being observed more carefully. As if each interaction mattered. As if each choice was being recorded. That was when we understood something even more disturbing: they had watched everything. Not only the fall of technology. Not only the hunger, the collapse, the difficult decisions. They had seen every small gesture, every silent betrayal, every act of compassion that cost too much. They had seen families split apart to increase chances of survival. They had seen groups close doors to strangers. They had seen people choose to live one more day, at someone else's expense. And they did not intervene. Worse, they adjusted the scenario to make everything more intense. By bringing us closer together, they were not saving us. They were placing us in ideal conditions for the end. Less space. more contact, more potential conflict. As if they wanted to see what we would do when there was nowhere left to run. At night, sometimes, lights appeared in the sky. Not as before, not threatening, not dominant. They were stable, almost discreet. Like eyes. There were no messages. No commands. Only the clear sensation of being watched with curiosity. Not hatred. Not anger. Interest. And that was what broke us the most. Because indifference hurts less than entertainment. Some humans began to notice patterns. Certain types of behaviors seemed to extend existence. Others accelerated disappearance. People who isolated themselves too much vanished. People who became too violent also vanished. It was as if there were an ideal behavioral range, neither total chaos nor total refusal. Balance. Obedience without knowing whom we were obeying. I watched people change. Not to survive physically, but to fit into something invisible. I saw men and women adjusting their actions, suppressing impulses, shaping attitudes, as if trying to please an audience that never applauded. That was when I realized we were no longer fighting just to live. We were being evaluated. When the number dropped below 1,500, the displacements became more frequent. We woke up closer and closer to one another. Until, one morning, there were no more scattered groups. There was a place. A vast, silent territory, with a permanently clear sky and strangely uniform ground. There were no cities, no dense forests, no ruins. Only space. And us. The last ones. The counter finally slowed almost to a stop. The number remained static. And in that instant, for the first time since the beginning, something changed in the air. Not fear. Not urgency. But expectation. As if the spectacle had ended. And now came the next phase. When the number in the sky stopped at 1,000, no one celebrated. There was no relief there. There was no victory there. There was only the collective feeling that something had been completed, and that what came next would be worse. The sky did not open violently. It reorganized itself. The lights that had once observed aligned. The air vibrated differently, as if the atmosphere itself were being tuned for another purpose. Some of us fell to our knees. Others remained standing, motionless, staring upward like the condemned finally understanding the sentence. Then the ground disappeared. It did not collapse. It did not break. It simply ceased to exist beneath our feet. There was no free fall, no impact. The world was replaced around us with the same cold efficiency as changing an image on a screen. When my senses reorganized, I was no longer on Earth. We were all together now. The 1,000. A vast, enclosed, silent space, with smooth surfaces that seemed neither metal nor stone. There were no visible doors. No windows. And yet there was light, light without a source, without direction, casting no proper shadows. Some cried. Some screamed. Some simply sat down and accepted it. I observed. I had always been like that. Even before the end of the world, I observed more than I reacted. Perhaps that was what kept me alive. Perhaps that was what they wanted. It did not take long to understand that this was a ship. Not because of technical details, but because of the complete absence of anything human. Nothing there had been made for our comfort, nor for our suffering, only to contain us. Movement began shortly after. There were no windows, but we knew we were traveling because our bodies knew. Not acceleration, not force, disorientation. As if the very concept of distance were being rewritten inside us. Days passed. Or perhaps hours. Time did not behave properly there. We did not feel hunger. We did not feel thirst. Our bodies were kept in a constant, artificially stable state. That alone was terrifying. The absence of need made us passive. Then came the message. Not a voice, not spoken words, but an understanding inserted directly into the mind, too clear to be mistaken for our own thoughts. We were not chosen for being the strongest, nor the smartest, nor the kindest. We were chosen for being adaptable. The aliens did not want to rebuild humanity as it was. They wanted something better, or at least more efficient. Earth had not been destroyed out of hatred. It had been filtered. Billions died so that 1,000 could remain observable, moldable, testable. The experiment was not about survival. It was about behavior. They wanted to see what happens when a species loses everything, technology, history, identity, and is placed in a new environment, under new rules, without the illusion of control. We were the beginning of something that would no longer carry the name humanity. Some of us tried to resist once we understood. Tried to strike the surfaces. Tried to organize revolts. But how do you fight something that does not need to harm you to control you? Rebellion burned out quickly. Silence won. Today, as I write this, yes, somehow I can still record thoughts. I feel we are approaching the final destination. Subtle changes ripple through the ship. Adjustments. Preparation. I do not know what the planet that awaits us will be like. I do not know if there will be sky. I do not know if there will be fertile ground or only more tests. What I know is this: we were not saved. We were preserved. Humanity did not end in fire, nor nuclear war, nor divine judgment. It ended through efficiency, through scientific curiosity, through silent entertainment. And perhaps the cruelest truth of all is this: if one day someone finds this account, if one day another species hears our story, I hope they understand that we were not defeated because we were weak. We were defeated because we believed that surviving was the same as winning. The number in the sky reached 1,000. And in that moment, the universe decided that was enough.